Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into Will Trent Season 3, Episode 4, titled Buried Truths. If you've been following our recaps of the first three episodes, you know we're in the middle of some intense storylines, and Episode 4 delivers major developments on multiple fronts. This Will Trent Season 3, Episode 4 recap will cover everything from significant breakthroughs in the foster home case to shocking revelations in the ongoing police corruption investigation. Plus, we'll explore the continuing personal journeys of our favorite characters as they navigate increasingly complicated relationships and painful revelations from the past. If you're new here, I'm Amelia, and on this channel, we break down all your favorite crime dramas with the attention to detail that would make Will Trent himself proud. Before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss any of our weekly Will Trent recaps. Now, I need to give you all a major spoiler warning. We're going to discuss everything that happened in episode 4, so if you haven't watched it yet, this is your chance to pause this video and come back after you've seen it. Trust me, you'll want to experience these powerful moments firsthand. For those of you who are ready, let's jump into this Will Trent Season 3, Episode 4 recap and unpack what might be one of the most revealing episodes about institutional corruption and the long-lasting impact of childhood trauma. So grab your snacks, settle in, and let's dive into Buried Truths. Before we dive into Episode 4, let's quickly recap where we left off in Episode 3, Shadows of the Past. Will and Angie finally had their long-awaited confrontation, where Angie revealed her pregnancy and that Seth is the father. This emotional conversation left them in an uncertain place, not back together romantically, but acknowledging their deep connection and history. Will and Faith began investigating a disturbing case involving the remains of 8-year-old Marcus Jenkins, found buried in the foundation of a former group foster home. This case hit particularly close to home for Will, triggering memories of his own traumatic experiences in the foster care system. The police corruption investigation continued to expand, with Amanda and Orma Wood discovering financial transactions linking high-ranking APD officials to offshore accounts. The situation escalated when Detective Ray Sanchez, one of the corrupt officers who escaped in Episode 2, was found dead in what appeared to be a staged suicide, suggesting someone was eliminating witnesses. Will also made progress in his relationship with Ada Marion Alba, accepting her dinner invitation and beginning to open up about his past. Their connection offered a potential fresh start for Will, untainted by the complicated history he shares with others in his life. Additionally, Will confronted his biological father, Sheriff Caleb, about his mother's disappearance. Unsatisfied with Caleb's explanations, Will declared his intention to investigate what happened to his mother himself, setting up another personal quest that parallels his professional cases. With these multiple threads developing, Episode 4 picks up, with Will balancing his investigation of the foster home case, his growing relationship with Marion, and his determination to uncover the truth about his mother's disappearance. All while the corruption investigation threatens to expose dangerous secrets within the APD, the Will Trent season. 3 Episode 4. Recap continues with major developments in the foster home case. Episode 4 opens with Will and Faith returning to the abandoned foster home at dawn, armed with ground-penetrating radar equipment. The somber mood is established immediately as Will stares at the building, clearly struggling with the parallels to his own childhood experiences. Faith notices his discomfort, but respects his space, demonstrating their strengthened partnership. The Will Trent foster home case takes a dramatic turn when the radar detects not one, but 3 additional anomalies beneath the foundation. This discovery transforms what they thought was an isolated murder into something far more sinister, potentially a serial situation involving multiple children. As the GBI forensic team carefully excavates the site, Will steps away to call Amanda, who immediately recognizes the gravity of the situation. She assigns additional resources to the case and, in a telling moment, asks Will if he needs to step back given his personal connection. His response, These kids deserve someone who understands what they went through, encapsulates why Will is both the most affected by and the most qualified for this investigation. The excavation reveals the remains of three more children, all appearing to date from the same period in the early 1990s when the home was run by a couple named Robert and Elaine Mercer. The medical examiner's preliminary assessment indicates similar causes of death, blunt force trauma, suggesting a pattern of abuse rather than isolated incidents. Will and Faith tracked down former employees of the home, including a night janitor named Carl Winters, who worked there for the entire period the Mercers ran the facility. His interview provides crucial context about the home's operations. He describes the Mercers as outwardly professional, but notes that children who were labeled problem cases would often be isolated in the basement for special discipline. Some of these children later ran away, the official explanation for their disappearances. The most significant breakthrough comes when Will and Faith locate a former resident named Darius Washington, now in his late 30s, who was at the home during the same period as the victims. Initially reluctant to speak about his experiences, Darius eventually opens up when Will shares a small detail about his own time in foster care, a rare moment of personal disclosure that Faith notices with surprise. Darius reveals that the Mercers maintained a special discipline room in the basement where children who broke rules would be sent. Some children never returned from this room, their disappearances explained away as transfers or runaways. The system, chronically underfunded and overwhelmed, rarely followed up on these cases. In a particularly powerful scene, Darius describes how he once saw Robert Mercer leading Marcus Jenkins to the basement after the boy had attempted to call Child Protective Services. This testimony provides the first direct link between the Mercers and one of the victims. The Will Trent foster home case investigation leads to the discovery that both Mercers died years ago. Robert from a heart attack in 2005 and Elaine from cancer in 2010, seemingly escaping justice. However, Will notices discrepancies in the documentation of children who passed through the home, suggesting possible accomplices or witnesses who might still be alive. The episode doesn't shy away from depicting the systemic failures that allowed these crimes to occur. Records were poorly kept, complaints were ignored, and oversight was minimal. As Will puts it to Faith, the system didn't just fail these kids, it handed them to their killers and looked the other way. This section of the Will Trent season, 3 episode 4 recap, highlights how the show continues to use criminal investigations as vehicles to explore deeper societal issues. In this case, the chronic underfunding and negligence within the foster care system that Will himself experienced. The Will Trent mother investigation begins with limited clues. Parallel to the foster home case, Will begins his personal investigation into his mother's disappearance using the file Caleb provided. This Will Trent mother investigation represents a significant emotional journey for Will, who has spent his entire life with unanswered questions about his origins. The scene shifts to Will's home late at night, where he's spread the contents of the file across his dining table, the same table Angie refurbished for him, a subtle reminder of their complicated history. The file contains sparse information, a missing persons report filed weeks after his mother's disappearance, a few witness statements, and some photographs of a young woman named Lucy Trent. Will studies the photographs intently, looking for any resemblance to himself. It's a poignant moment as he searches for connection to a woman he never knew. The file indicates that Lucy was last seen in a neighborhood known for drug activity, supporting the official conclusion that her disappearance was drug-related. Unsatisfied with this explanation, Will begins creating his own investigation board, meticulously organizing the limited information and identifying gaps. He notes that the original investigation was cursory at best, with minimal follow-up on potential witnesses and no apparent effort to connect Lucy's disappearance to any other cases. The Will Trent mother investigation takes an interesting turn when Will discovers a notation about Lucy's workplace. She had been a waitress at a diner called Rosie's that has long since closed. This small detail gives Will his first actionable lead. The next day, Will visits the location where Rosie's once stood, now a convenience store. The current owner knows nothing about the diner, but an elderly customer overhears Will's questions and mentions that the diner's former cook, Harold, still lives in the neighborhood. Will tracks down Harold, now in his 80s, who remembers Lucy despite the decades that have passed. Harold describes her as a hard worker who was trying to get clean after struggling with addiction. He mentions that in the weeks before her disappearance, Lucy seemed frightened and mentioned a man who was following her. When Will shows Harold a photo of Caleb from that era, Harold doesn't recognize him, casting doubt on Caleb's claim that he had no significant relationship with Lucy. This discrepancy adds another layer of suspicion to Caleb's account of events. The Will Trent mother investigation scene ends with Will adding this new information to his board, drawing a question mark next to Caleb's photo. The camera lingers on Will's face, showing his determination mixed with the emotional weight of investigating his own origin story. This storyline effectively parallels the foster home case. Both involve Will seeking justice for victims who were failed by the systems meant to protect them, and both connect deeply to his personal history. The Will Trent S 3E4 analysis shows how the episode uses these parallel investigations to explore Will's character from different angles. The GBI corruption investigation uncovers a conspiracy reaching the highest levels, while Will focuses on the foster home case and his mother's disappearance. Amanda and Ormwood continue pursuing the police corruption investigation. This storyline takes a dramatic turn in episode 4 as they discover the conspiracy extends far beyond what they initially suspected. The GBI corruption investigation scene opens with Amanda reviewing financial records in her office when Ormwood arrives with new information. His contact in financial crimes has identified a pattern in the offshore accounts. Regular payments coinciding with major drug busts and asset seizures, suggesting that evidence and seized drugs are being resold rather than destroyed. Amanda decides to bring Faith into this aspect of the investigation, recognizing that they need additional trusted personnel. In a secure meeting room, the three discuss their findings and the implications. The evidence points to an organized system of corruption involving multiple officers across different ranks and departments. The breakthrough comes when they identify a common thread. All the corrupt officers they've identified so far worked under Captain Thomas Reynolds at some point in their careers. Reynolds, a decorated 30-year veteran of the APD, is known for mentoring promising officers and has connections throughout the department. The GBI corruption investigation becomes significantly more dangerous when Amanda receives an anonymous tip about a scheduled meeting between Reynolds and several officers at an abandoned warehouse. She organizes a surveillance operation, with Ormwood positioned to observe due to his familiarity with APD personnel. The surveillance reveals Reynolds meeting with 3 officers, including Deputy Chief Wilson, indicating the corruption reaches the highest levels of the APD. The team captures audio of the meeting, where Reynolds discusses cleaning house after Sanchez's death and ensuring there are no loose ends. The most shocking moment comes when Reynolds explicitly mentions Amanda by name, stating that Wagner is getting too close and needs to be dealt with. This direct threat elevates the stakes dramatically and transforms the investigation from merely professional to personally dangerous for the GBI team. Amanda, characteristically unfazed by the threat, uses it to secure additional resources for the investigation. However, she also implements new security protocols for the team, recognizing the serious danger they now face from corrupt officers who have both the training and authority to act against them. The GBI corruption investigation storyline effectively balances procedural elements with personal stakes. The corruption isn't just an abstract crime, but a direct threat to characters we care about, creating tension that will likely build throughout the season. This section of the Will Trent Season 3 Episode 4 recap highlights the show's skill at developing multiple storylines that, while separate on the surface, thematically connect through issues of institutional failure, abuse of power, and the difficulty of finding justice within flawed systems. The Marion Alba-Will relationship development shows promising growth. Amidst the intense investigations, Episode 4 makes time for significant developments in the characters' personal relationships, particularly the growing connection between Will and Marion Alba. Following their dinner in episode 3, the Marion Alba Will relationship development continues when Marion arrives at the GBI office with information relevant to the foster home case. She's discovered that there were multiple complaints filed against the Mercers over the years, but they were consistently dismissed due to insufficient evidence by the same family court judge, raising questions about possible corruption beyond just the foster home. What begins as a professional interaction shifts when Marion notices Will's exhaustion and suggests they grab coffee. During this brief respite from the case, their conversation turns personal. Marion shares stories about her own family, including her parents' immigration from Cuba and the values they instilled in her, particularly her father's belief that justice is worth fighting for, even when the system makes it difficult. This sentiment clearly resonates with Will, who opens up slightly about his frustration with the foster home case and the systemic failures it represents. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he admits that cases involving children in the system affect him differently because I know what it's like to be voiceless in a system that's supposed to protect you. Marion's response is compassionate without being pitying, a balance few people in Will's life have managed to strike. She acknowledges the difficulty without treating Will as damaged or defined solely by his past. This approach clearly resonates with Will, who seems more comfortable with Marion than with most people. The Marion Alba Will relationship development takes another step forward when she offers to help with research on the foster home case in her free time. Will initially hesitates, his instinct to handle things alone still strong, but ultimately accepts her offer, a small but significant indication of his growing trust in her. The scene ends with a moment of subtle connection. Marion briefly touches Will's hand while emphasizing a point, and neither pulls away immediately. The chemistry between them continues to develop naturally, without feeling forced or rushed. Meanwhile, the episode also touches on Angie's pregnancy storyline, showing her at a doctor's appointment with Seth. The ultrasound reveals everything is progressing normally, but Angie's expression suggests conflicted emotions. Later, in a brief phone conversation with Will about an unrelated matter, there's an awkward moment when they both clearly want to say more but don't know how to navigate their new boundaries. Faith's personal life gets a rare spotlight when she mentions having to leave early for her son's school event, prompting a supportive response from Will, another indication of their strengthened partnership and friendship. These personal moments provide necessary emotional balance to the darker case elements, while also developing the characters beyond their professional roles. The Will Trent S 3E4 analysis shows how effectively the episode integrates these relationship developments with the ongoing investigations, using quieter scenes to build connections that will likely become important as the season's threats escalate. This Will Trent episode 4 breakdown reveals surprising connections between cases. As the episode moves toward its climax, unexpected connections begin to emerge between the seemingly separate investigations, creating a more complex narrative web. The foster home case takes a significant turn when Faith discovers that the family court judge who dismissed complaints against the Mercers, Judge Lawrence Wilson, is the father of Deputy Chief Wilson, who was just identified in the corruption investigation. This connection suggests the possibility of a multi-generational pattern of corruption and cover-ups. Will and Faith pursue this lead, reviewing old case files that pass through Judge Wilson's court. They discover a pattern of dismissed complaints not just against the Mercers' home, but several other facilities as well. More disturbing, they find that children who filed serious complaints often ended up transferred to the Mercers' home shortly afterward, essentially being sent to their abusers as punishment for speaking up. This Will Trent episode 4 breakdown reveals how the foster home case and corruption investigation begin to intertwine. The team theorizes that Judge Wilson may have been protecting the Mercers and other abusive foster homes for reasons beyond simple negligence, possibly involving financial kickbacks or other criminal connections. Meanwhile, Will's investigation into his mother takes an unexpected turn when he discovers a notation in her missing persons file about a witness who claimed to have seen Lucy arguing with a man in a police uniform shortly before her disappearance. This detail was never followed up on in the original investigation, raising questions about whether police corruption might have played a role in her case as well. The episode builds tension as these separate threads begin to suggest a larger pattern of institutional corruption spanning decades. Amanda, recognizing the potential scope of what they're uncovering, brings the team together for a secure briefing where they share information across all three investigations. In the episode's most shocking revelation, they discover that Captain Reynolds, the central figure in the current police corruption investigation, was a patrol officer in the same district where Lucy Trent disappeared and where the Mercers' foster home was located. While this could be coincidence, it raises the disturbing possibility that the corruption they're currently investigating has roots going back decades and may connect directly to Will's personal history. This Will Trent Episode 4 breakdown highlights how the show excels at building complex, interconnected narratives that span both time and different institutions. The suggestion that current corruption might be linked to historical cases creates a rich storytelling framework that elevates the show beyond typical procedural formats. The scene ends with Will visibly processing these potential connections, particularly the possibility that his mother's disappearance might be linked to the same corruption he's currently investigating. Faith, noticing his reaction, asks if he's okay. Will's response, "I will be when we get to the truth," encapsulates his character's driving motivation throughout the series. The Will Trent S 3E4 analysis shows how the episode builds to multiple climactic moments. The episode builds toward its conclusion with several significant developments occurring in rapid succession, creating momentum that will carry into future episodes. The foster home investigation reaches a critical point when the team identifies a former social worker named Patricia Gaines, who worked closely with the Mercers and Judge Wilson. Now in her 70s and living in a nursing home, Gaines initially denies any knowledge of wrongdoing. However, when confronted with evidence of her involvement in transferring children who complained to the Mercers' home, her demeanor changes. In one of the episode's most powerful scenes, Will connects with Gaines by sharing a small detail about his own experience in the system. How a social worker once ignored his report of abuse because it would mean paperwork and disruption. This moment of vulnerability from Will, rare in professional settings, breaks through Gaines's defenses. She admits to knowing about the abuse, but claims she was pressured by Judge Wilson to ignore complaints and falsify reports. When Will asks why she complied, he said no one would believe the kids anyway. And he was right. No one ever asked questions when they disappeared. This confession provides crucial evidence linking Judge Wilson directly to the cover-up. Though Gaines claims she never knew the children were being killed, she assumed they were simply being transferred again or running away. Whether this claim is true remains ambiguous, creating moral complexity that the show handles well. Meanwhile, the corruption investigation accelerates when Amanda receives word that Captain Reynolds has scheduled an emergency meeting with several high-ranking officers, including Deputy Chief Wilson. Concerned they might be planning to destroy evidence, Amanda makes the bold decision to move forward with arrests sooner than planned. The operation to arrest Reynolds and his associates is meticulously planned, but faces a complication when Reynolds unexpectedly changes the meeting location at the last minute. This forces the team to adapt quickly, with Ormwood providing crucial intelligence about the new location's layout. The arrest scene is tense and well executed, with GBI agents surrounding the building as Amanda personally leads the team to apprehend Reynolds. When confronted, Reynolds maintains his innocence and warns Amanda that she's making a career-ending mistake. Her response, "The only mistake was thinking you were above the law," that delivers a satisfying moment of justice. However, the victory is incomplete. While Reynolds and two other officers are arrested, Deputy Chief Wilson is not present at the meeting. When agents arrive at his home with a warrant, they find signs of a hasty departure. Wilson has fled, suggesting he was tipped off about the impending arrests. The Will Trent Season 3 Episode 4 analysis shows how these climactic developments maintain tension even as they provide partial resolution. The arrest of Reynolds represents progress, but Wilson's escape ensures the threat continues. Similarly, the confession from Gaines advances the foster home case, but raises new questions about how many people were involved in the cover up. The episode's final climactic moment occurs when Will returns home, emotionally drained from the day's events, to find an unmarked envelope that was slipped under his door. Inside is a Polaroid photograph of a young woman who appears to be his mother, standing next to a man whose face has been deliberately cut out of the image. On the back is written, "A stop looking." This threatening message confirms that Will's investigation into his mother's disappearance has not gone unnoticed and adds personal danger to his quest for answers. The Will Trent S 3E4 analysis reveals how effectively the episode balances partial resolutions with new complications, maintaining narrative momentum while deepening the season's central mysteries. A comprehensive Will Trent Episode 4 breakdown reveals key themes and character development. Looking beyond the plot mechanics, Buried Truths excels in its thematic coherence and character development. This Will Trent Episode 4 breakdown examines how these elements create a rich narrative tapestry. The episode's title, Buried Truths, works on multiple levels. Most literally, it refers to the buried remains of the foster home victims. Metaphorically, it represents the buried secrets within institutions like the foster care system, the police department, and even Will's own family history. The theme of excavation, of bringing hidden truths to light, unifies the episode's various storylines. Institutional failure emerges as a central theme across all investigations. The foster care system failed to protect vulnerable children. The police department has been corrupted from within. And the justice system, represented by Judge Wilson, participated in covering up crimes rather than prosecuting them. These systemic breakdowns are contrasted with the individual integrity of characters like Will, Faith, and Amanda, who work within flawed institutions while trying to reform them. The episode also explores the theme of generational harm. The crimes at the foster home have left decades of trauma in their wake, affecting survivors like Darius Washington well into adulthood. The police corruption appears to span generations, from Reynolds' early career to the current department leadership. Even Will's investigation into his mother suggests patterns of harm that continue to impact the present. Power dynamics and their abuse receive particular attention. The Mercers exploited their power over vulnerable children. Judge Wilson used his authority to silence victims, and the corrupt police officers weaponized their badges to commit crimes with impunity. The show doesn't shy away from depicting how power structures can enable abuse when proper oversight and accountability are absent. Character development in this episode is particularly noteworthy. Will shows growth in his willingness to selectively share personal experiences when it serves the investigation, something he would have avoided in earlier seasons. This strategic vulnerability represents an evolution in how he approaches both his work and his trauma. Marion continues to develop as a character who understands Will in ways others don't, recognizing his need for both connection and space. Their relationship progresses naturally with mutual respect and shared values forming its foundation, rather than mere attraction. Amanda demonstrates her leadership skills through decisive action against corruption, even when it means targeting high-ranking officers. Her willingness to put herself at risk by personally leading the arrest operation speaks to her character's courage and commitment to justice. Faith's growing confidence as an investigator is evident in how she independently pursues the connection between Judge Wilson and Deputy Chief Wilson, making a crucial breakthrough without Will's input. This development suggests her character is moving toward greater agency and leadership. The Will Trent Episode 4 breakdown wouldn't be complete without acknowledging how the episode advances the season's larger narrative. The suggestion that the current corruption investigation, the historical foster home crimes, and Will's mother's disappearance might all be connected creates a compelling overarching mystery that transcends the typical case of the week format. Visually, the episode uses contrasting settings to reinforce its themes. The dark, decaying foster home where victims were buried stands in stark contrast to the gleaming police headquarters, where corruption flourishes behind a facade of legitimacy. Will's home, with its investigation boards and carefully organized case files, represents his attempt to create order from the chaos of his past and present cases. Based on the developments in episode 4, we can make some educated guesses about where season 3 might be heading. This Will Trent season 3 episode 4 recap provides several clues about future storylines. The convergence of the three main investigations, the foster home case, the police corruption probe, and Will's search for his mother, suggests they will continue to intertwine, potentially revealing a larger conspiracy. Deputy Chief Wilson's escape ensures the corruption storyline will continue, likely with increased personal danger for the GBI team. The threatening photograph sent to Will indicates that someone is actively monitoring his investigation into his mother and wants him to stop. This raises questions about who might feel threatened by Will uncovering the truth. Could it be Caleb, whose story about his relationship with Lucy already contains suspicious gaps? Or perhaps someone connected to the police corruption, suggesting Lucy's disappearance was related to something she witnessed? Judge Wilson's connection to the foster home case will likely be explored further. As a family court judge with decades of service, he potentially enabled abuse in multiple facilities beyond just the Mercer's home. This could expand the investigation to other former foster homes and reveal many more victims. The Marion-Alba-Will relationship appears to be developing toward deeper emotional connection. However, as the various investigations grow more dangerous, Marion's position as an ADA might put her at risk, especially if the corruption extends to the district attorney's office. This could create conflict between Will's growing feelings for her and his concern for her safety. Angie's pregnancy storyline will continue to evolve, potentially creating complications in her relationship with Seth as the birth approaches. The unresolved tension between Will and Angie suggests their new boundaries will be tested, especially if either faces danger in upcoming episodes. Faith's character arc seems to be moving toward greater leadership responsibility. Her growing confidence and the respect she commands from both Will and Amanda suggests she might be offered a promotion or special assignment as the season progresses. The revelation about Will's mother being seen arguing with a police officer before her disappearance opens intriguing possibilities. If Reynolds or other corrupt officers were involved in her disappearance, it could explain why the original investigation was so cursory. This connection would make Will's pursuit of justice both professional and deeply personal. Amanda's direct confrontation with Reynolds and his corruption network will likely have repercussions. The arrested officers might offer deals to implicate others, potentially exposing corruption in other institutions beyond just the APD. Alternatively, those still at large might target Amanda directly, putting her in significant danger. As we wrap up this Will Trent Season 3, Episode 4 recap, I want to thank you for joining me for this in-depth analysis.